Before the events of the movies and Welcome to Derry series, Pennywise and other forms of the entity known as It have been seen many times around the outskirts of Derry. The creature showed itself mostly to children, but there are cases of adults encountering the entity as well, and these encounters are no less terrifying. However, the most interesting thing about all of this is that the interval between these incidents is roughly 27 years every time and always starts or ends with a horrifying case like a terrible death or an event involving a large number of victims. I've gathered information about all of the known events, starting with the creature's first awakening and leading up to the events of the Welcome to Derry show. We know that the entity arrived on our planet millions or perhaps even billions of years ago in the form of some sort of comet and crash-landed in a place that would one day become Derry. The strange cosmic material that was part of the comet is known to limit the entity's abilities. This is the same material we see the native tribes using in the series to bind the creature to a single location. It's unclear how the entity survived for all those years before the first humans arrived in Maine. In the movies, we only see it feeding on humans, but there were no humans in that area at the time, so the two most popular ideas suggest that it was either hibernating, trapped in its cage for thousands of years, or survived by feeding on forest animals. Whatever the case may be, with the arrival of the first humans around 12,000 years ago, the entity likely became their problem. We don't know for sure about interactions between individual tribes and the entity so long ago, but it's safe to assume that the few unlucky people who stumbled upon its territory likely encountered it with deadly results. This is all speculative because the native people did not leave historical reports. The first official records describing the creature's actions appear much later during the earliest attempts to found Derry. It happened around 1791. A small number of people used the area that would later become the town of Derry to hunt beavers. Things went well, and the original settlers moved to this location with their families for permanent residence, increasing the camp's population to approximately 91 people. Shortly after, they decided to sign a charter establishing the township of Derry. Unfortunately for them, they were on the entity's territory, and its hibernation cycle was just coming to an end. During the winter between 1791 and 1792, all 91 settlers disappeared under unknown circumstances. The case is poorly documented because it happened so long ago. But considering what we know from later cases, it's almost certain that the Maine State Police knew about the disappearances, but decided not to do anything about it. Throughout the entire history of Derry, the cases of people, particularly children, going missing were numerous, but nobody ever took them seriously. Among the people of Derry, it is commonly believed that the reason is that a string of murders doesn't make the news if they happen in a tiny town like theirs. However, the real reason the horrors went unnoticed is that the entity uses its powers to prevent each case from being investigated, stopping the process at an early stage. After the 1792 disappearances, a period began where the creature's actions, if any took place at all, did not make it into the historical record. That is, until 1908, when a terrible incident occurred during the Easter celebrations. By that time, Derry's population already numbered several thousand, and a large children's Easter event was organized. The main idea was to hide dozens of chocolate eggs across the grounds for children to search for. The event was meant to be an exciting quest for the kids, with delicious chocolate eggs as prizes. The only problem was that the event coincided with the end of the creature's cycle of feeding, causing things to take the worst possible turn. The area chosen for the event was the Kitchener Ironworks. This was a large factory that had been operating for decades, and its grounds were well suited for hiding eggs among the industrial structures. To ensure the safety of both the children and their parents, all the machinery was turned off completely. At least, that's what people would say later. The event was going smoothly, and most of the eggs had already been found. The children were happy and didn't want the fun to end when suddenly, the entire factory erupted in an explosion. Fire rapidly consumed the entire structure, inevitably leading to numerous casualties. That day, 102 people tragically died in Derry, 88 of whom were children. The police were unable to determine the cause of the explosion. The official verdict was sabotage of the equipment, but according to residents, this was impossible as all the equipment had been completely shut down. The tragedy at the Kitchener Ironworks is shown in the opening sequence of Welcome to Derry, and in Chapter 1, in the scene where Ben reviews photos from that day, a blurry man in a clown suit can be seen in the background. The catastrophe at the Kitchener Ironworks marked the completion of the entity's feeding cycle in 1908. After that, the cases of people going missing finally ended. The town gradually began forgetting the massacre, moving on with their lives. But like it always happens in Derry, once 27 years had passed, it was time for the creature to feed again. Sometime before 1935, a gang of criminals began to operate in the town. The crew of 4 outlaws, known as the Bradley Gang, arrived in Derry, seeking refuge after a series of robberies in New Hampshire. They planned to hide from prosecution, and Derry seemed like the perfect place to lay low. A quiet, inconspicuous town where trouble often went unnoticed. However, as time passed, the gang's actions became more and more brazen. They walked in a group, were armed, and behaved threateningly. Eventually, the gang decided to rob a local bank and began preparing for the operation, examining the bank's schedule and checking the escape routes. The people of Derry, who had managed to return to normal life 27 years after the Kitchener Ironworks disaster, were unhappy with this turn of events. And considering that Pennywise was active during this period, its influence made people even more angry and determined. The residents decided to take matters into their own hands. On that fateful day in 1935, when the Bradley Gang appeared on the streets, the townspeople were ready. What followed was a brutal massacre in broad daylight. Armed citizens of Derry, driven by rage, ambushed the gang members and started shooting. The attack was merciless. The 4 criminals didn't stand a chance against the organized mob of locals. And although the official records would later claim it was a shootout with the Derry Police Department, the truth was that ordinary citizens were the ones who participated in the slaughter. However, the most horrifying detail of this entire story was what happened during and after the shooting. Numerous witnesses across town, both those who participated and those who simply observed, claimed they saw a clown at the scene. But when it came to details, the clown's locations differed. Some saw him on the roof, some in the windows, and some in another part of town. These testimonies were so widespread that they couldn't be ignored, but as always in Derry, no one officially investigated these strange coincidences. Even in the intro to Welcome to Derry, it's hard not to notice Pennywise on one of the buildings, also taking part in the massacre. The next big event is in the spoiler zone, and it takes place in episode 7 of Welcome to Derry. In this video, I try not to spoil the major events of the series for those who haven't seen it yet, but if you would like to see a comparison of the events at the black spot in the book and in the series, let me know in the comments, and I will cover this topic soon. Leave a like if you've watched up to this point. I do reviews of Stephen King's lore and other universes, and I hope to see you again soon. Bye.